The New York Times reporting tonight that a, quote, shaken Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein felt used by the White House for his role in the firing of the former FBI Director James Comey. That allegation comes as House Republicans continue to battle with the Justice Department over documents related to what the president has dubbed Spygate. Let's talk about it with Republican Congressman from Florida, Matt Gaetz, who is on the House Judiciary Committee, and he's had a busy week. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Shannon.
Okay, so we want to play a little bit more of that interaction between Rod Rosenstein and Congressman Jordan. We'll talk about it after you listen in.
Why are you keeping information from Congress?
Sir, I certainly hope that your colleagues are not under that impression. That is not accurate, sir. And
it is accurate. We have caught you hiding information.
As with most things in Washington, the real work is not done on television, and it's not all done by me. Trump administration officials are meeting and talking with your staff every day. They're working overtime with teams of FBI employees to accommodate requests and produce relevant information to this committee, other House committees, and several Senate committees.
He also talked yesterday about whether or not this was getting personal. These were personal attacks on him. How do you respond to those who say that you guys are showboating up there, giving him a hard time?
There are very valid reasons that we're skeptical of the Deputy Attorney General's answers. There are responses to the requests that we've made to the Justice Department that were improperly redacted, not for national security reasons, but just because the information was embarrassing to the Justice Department or the FBI. Specifically, the text message Peter Strzok sent, where he said, no, he won't, we'll stop him, about the Trump presidency. It was only 9 days before that he opened up on Papadopoulos, and only 6 days after that he was talking about an insurance policy against the Trump presidency. So we see time and again a Department of Justice and FBI that cleared Hillary Clinton before even interviewing her, and yet at the same time convicting Donald Trump before even investigating him sincerely. And so we want to see the documents that predate July 31st. We think that there may have been intelligence collected against the Trump campaign that we haven't been briefed about. And Shannon, at the end of the day, it's either elected people that get to conduct oversight or unelected people run the show. And I prefer to live in a world where the elected representatives of Congress can conduct meaningful oversight.
You guys are co-equal branches. But beyond that point, let's hear from one of your colleagues across the aisle, and I'll give you a chance to respond to this.
To the House Judiciary Committee, they are his fixers in Congress. That is, about 20 Michael Cohens sitting there trying to fix this investigation in the president's favor.
Is that what you're trying to do?
No, I dress considerably better than Michael Cohen, and so I reject the characterization. Look, we're just trying to do our job. I mean, Rod Rosenstein said on May 1st of this year that he didn't believe there was any constitutional basis for oversight. I mean, my goodness, it's our job to appropriate funds and then make sure those funds are used correctly. And here you've got an investigation of the sitting president of the United States where, in response to my questioning, the Deputy Attorney General wouldn't even say whether he read the document he signed allowing intelligence to be collected against someone associated with Donald Trump. And so, I'm deeply concerned when you have people that aren't telling the truth to Congress, that are hiding documents that aren't national security related. They're just embarrassing. And then at the same time, they continue to make these or allow this investigation to persist against the president that is built on a rotten foundation from biased agents who demonstrated their bias in text messages to one another. I think it's time to wrap this investigation up and move on to the important issues that are facing the country.
What you guys passed on Thursday has been described as a non-binding resolution insisting that the DOJ comply with a committee subpoena for documents related to the Russia investigation by July 6th. Does it have any teeth? You guys have had a number of deadlines that have come and gone. What does this do differently than what's happened in the past?
Well, the bottom line is no, it doesn't. But you've seen a small group of us on the Judiciary Committee on an almost nightly basis trying to share with the American people what's happening in a rotten investigation. For the first time, we got the entire House of Representatives to take an overwhelming vote in favor of our ability to conduct oversight and demand transparency. And so when the body speaks as a whole, this would set up a potential contempt charge or even an impeachment if Rod Rosenstein and the Department of Justice don't give us the documents that we're entitled to and that I think the American people want to have access to.
Well, the president says he believes that you and Mr. Rosenstein will work this all out. We'll watch and see. Of course, we'll be monitoring that deadline next week. In the meantime, keep us updated and have a great weekend.
You too, Shannon. Did you read the FISA application before you signed it?
I'm not going to comment about any FISA application.
So you won't say to this committee whether or not you even read the document you signed that authorized spying on people associated with the Trump campaign?
Well, I dispute your characterization of what that FISA is about, sir.
Well, that's Congressman Matt Gaetz demanding answers about the FISA application used to monitor former Trump campaign aide Carter Page during yesterday's hearing with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher Wray. Congressman Gaetz joins us live now. Congressman, good morning.
Good morning, and I didn't think it was a trick question to ask the Deputy Attorney General if he had read the document that bears his signature that allowed the United States government to spy on a presidential campaign. You'd think that was a softball question, but it shows how mangled things have become at the Department of Justice and the FBI, and so I'm hoping we're able to get documents that will provide answers because we haven't been getting the answers from the senior leadership.
Congressman, you and your colleagues were demanding a lot of answers in that hearing room yesterday. Did you get any?
We certainly didn't get the answers we wanted, and in addition to the clip you just showed, there seems to be now new inconsistency developing in the Department of Justice's story. They previously said that they opened the Trump-Russia investigation on July 31st when they got a communication about George Papadopoulos. But when I asked what investigative activity occurred before July 31st, Rosenstein and Strzok both said that's classified. Which is a weird answer, right? Because if nothing happened before July 31st, you'd think they would just say it. It may very well be, Sandra, that the president's claims that intelligence was collected against his campaign were in fact true. And if the FBI and Department of Justice made liars out of Paul Ryan and Trey Gowdy, I think they're going to have to answer for that.
You know, you are saying a lot there, Congressman, and we were watching these exchanges yesterday live on this program because the hearing started about now, and it got fiery. And your colleague Trey Gowdy was certainly demanding answers as well. And this was another one of those fiery exchanges. Watch this.
We've seen the bias. We need to see the evidence. If you have evidence of wrongdoing by any member of the Trump campaign, present it to the damn grand jury. Whatever you got, finish it the hell up, because this country is being torn apart.
Congressman, you were there. You heard it too. What did you think of that?
Well, I think it's a good thing that we've actually got someone before the Congress that we're holding accountable. Trey Gowdy understands that Bob Mueller answers to Rod Rosenstein. And if Rosenstein wanted to accelerate the pace, if he wanted to show the American people where this investigation stands, we could. All we know as the American people is that the very same people that worked on Hillary Clinton's investigation then worked on the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation and then went to Mueller's investigation. And all the while, they were spewing venom and bias that even the Inspector General was saying cast a cloud over whether the official acts of the government were impacted by that bias. Now, the Inspector General's a Democrat. He also was very critical of that staffing decision to take the very same people that had worked on the Clinton investigation and then have them ultimately working for Bob Mueller. As someone who has worked on a number of public corruption cases, the Inspector General said that that was very odd and that that was not something that was a standard practice that we should replicate. So time and again, bad processes by the FBI and the Department of Justice, and that's why we'd like to see this come to a conclusion.
Congressman, the top Democrat on the Judiciary Committee, the committee that was holding the hearing yesterday, said Republicans are requesting documents they know they cannot have. He says this is all an effort, and you hear this from other Democrats, that this is an effort on the part of Republicans to undermine the special counsel's investigation. What do you say back to that?
Well, I would say the special counsel's done a good enough job undermining his own investigation. That's why the latest CBS poll shows that more than half the country disapproves of the way that Bob Mueller's handling the investigation. But here's the binary choice, Sandra. We either live in a country where, at the end of the day, it's elected people that make the decisions, or we live in a country where unelected people like Rod Rosenstein, who's never faced the voters, get to decide on these fundamental questions. And our belief is that there should be congressional oversight. It's deeply troubling that on May 1st, Rod Rosenstein said that there is no constitutional basis for congressional oversight. And I think that the American people should be deeply troubled by that, to have a senior official in our government who essentially believes that he answers to no one. Not even the voters, not even the Congress, not even the president. And that's troubling to me. And so that's why we're going to stay on the case. We're going to keep demanding documents, and we're going to hold their feet to the fire.
Final question to you, Congressman. At the end of that exchange we played leading into you with Rod Rosenstein, he told you, we have absolutely conveyed all the questions Chairman Nunes has raised, and I'm optimistic that they'll be able to respond to him fairly soon. Have you had any further communication with the DOJ, Rod Rosenstein, or do you expect to soon?
Well, that was not Chairman Nunes' viewpoint. He's very frustrated and angry to the point of contempt and impeachment if necessary to get these documents. I'm proud to have Devin Nunes' back. We've not gotten the answers we want. That's one of the reasons why yesterday the entire Congress took a vote saying that we demand the documents in 7 days, and if we don't get them, then a lot of pressure will fall to our leadership. Will they defend our institution and our prerogative for oversight, or will they roll over for Rod Rosenstein and the rest of the folks at the DOJ who are frustrating our efforts? I hope they'll stand with us, and I suspect that they will.
Congressman Matt Gaetz, fresh off of that grilling of the DOJ and the FBI and the heads of those departments, it was quite a hearing. It was, you know, a lot of people
more to come. I would expect
come.
Comey and Lynch would be next.
All right.
Yep, Comey, Lynch, Strzok. We're going to see them all in public, and we should have the cameras on.
All right, Congressman Gaetz, thank you.
Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein facing some tough questions from lawmakers yesterday at the House Judiciary Committee, along with FBI Director Chris Wray, who testified as well. Lawmakers demanding answers as they accuse the Justice Department of withholding documents related to the Russia probe. Joined now live by Robert Driscoll. He's managing partner of the D.C. office of McGlinchey Stafford, a former Deputy Assistant Attorney General. Welcome, Robert. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Ed.
What was your takeaway? Because I have to say that I think between the border crisis and the retirement of Justice Anthony Kennedy, not enough people in the country maybe have been able to focus in on that IG report from the Justice Department that basically had this bottom line saying there was no real bias, even though they had page after page suggesting just that, bias.
Well, I mean, I think the report was stunning, at least to me, as a former DOJ official, to read. And I think that I think it's a misstatement to say that it concluded there was no bias. I think it concluded there was rampant bias in certain parts of the FBI and possibly the DOJ. It just concluded that the decision on the Hillary emails alone would not have been, at least there's no evidence that that was altered because of the bias that existed.
Yeah.
But that conclusion did not obtain to the Russia half of this, which is why the second half of this report, when it comes out, will be interesting.
It will, but just to challenge that, it did seem to have a bottom line in the first version of this, if you will, round one, that, well, the bias didn't really impact the Hillary Clinton email server probe. How could it not, Robert, when you have, you know, Peter Strzok and others basically saying we need to stop Donald Trump at all costs? How does that not permeate an investigation of Hillary Clinton?
Oh, I think he said, Inspector General Horowitz said that did cast a cloud over the entire investigation. I think that's true. I think he was just basing it, and he doesn't want to kind of get too far over his skis and drawing conclusions, but I think he's just basing it on a timeline issue, that the Hillary probe was wrapped up, most of the bad texts show up after that, and then the decisions on the Trump probe were made. So he felt comfortable concluding that some of Strzok's actions taken with respect to, say, favoring the Trump investigation over the Hillary investigation in terms of allocation of time, that may have been influenced by bias, because that happened right after those bad emails. The emails, however, post-dated the Hillary conclusion. But, I mean, to me, it's not much of a stretch to say, well, if he felt that way in August, he probably felt that way in March. You know, I doubt that whatever happened between March and August had that great an effect on Mr. Strzok.
To say the least. Another great issue of concern, obviously, is Rod Rosenstein overseeing the Mueller probe, but also his handling of his name was on at least one of those FISA warrants signed off on to conduct surveillance we should say is a proper way to term it, in terms of conducting surveillance of former Trump advisor Carter Page. But when asked about whether this was spying and pressed on that point, he sort of revealed that it's unclear whether or not he actually knew what was in the papers that he signed. Watch this exchange.
Mr. Rosenstein, why are you keeping information from Congress?
Congressman, I am not keeping any information from Congress that it's appropriate.
In a few minutes, Mr. Rosenstein, I think the House of Representatives is going to say something different.
I don't agree with you, Congressman. I don't believe that's what they're going to say, and if they do, they'll be mistaken.
Well, there was another clip in there where back and forth with Matt Gaetz of Florida, he was pressed on whether or not he read the document, the FISA warrant, and he wouldn't answer directly yes or no. Either he read it or he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, those kind of things are always awkward. I think it's exacerbated because he was under oath. Because I think if you've ever seen like a Title III warrant application or something, and I think a FISA warrant, it's probably just as big. Some of those things can be very thick with tons of exhibits. And so I think unless you're very clear that you read every page of it, I'd be reluctant to say under oath that I had read it all as opposed to having read the substance of it or been briefed on it. But it's always better just to be straightforward and say, I signed it after I was briefed on it, or I signed based on representations of my deputies. I mean, there's plenty of things senior people like the AG or the deputy AG sign that they get briefed on what it is without reading every word of it. But it certainly, was awkward to see.
Yeah. OK, so where are we in all this? Because you see House Republicans like Jim Jordan, who we just heard from, pressing these resolutions going after Rosenstein. They're talking about maybe even trying to impeach him as the deputy attorney general. What implications may that have? Where do we go from here?
I mean, I think it really depends on how far the Republicans want to go with this kind of Republican on Republican crime, with this fighting back and forth. Because the reality is there's not much to do other than impeach or, try to sanction or hold in contempt the Deputy Attorney General, which I think is hard to do and is of kind of little practical effect. I think they're doing what they can do is bringing cameras and attention to the fact they want more documents. It's very hard as an outsider to kind of know where the appropriate line is because we're not seeing any of the documents in place. But I think they're doing what they feel like they can do by applying public pressure to the Department of Justice. But I think once we get this second half of the report, it should have most of the kind of motive questions the Republicans are looking for, and maybe the heat off this dispute will come down. But right now it's pretty tense.
All right, Robert Driscoll, appreciate your insights today. Thanks for joining us.
All right, we're told the FBI has been cleaning house, trying to get rid of those nefarious characters or those that might have biases, whatever you want to call it. Not everyone is buying it, though. Former Justice Department official J. Christian Adams here to sort all this out. What can we believe? I have a tough time understanding how difficult it is to fire someone, period. But what do you think is going on?
Well, at the FBI, they seem to move them to human resources. Neil, it doesn't make any sense to say they're cleaning house, because look who they've gotten rid of. Andrew McCabe. He was found by the Inspector General to have repeatedly lied under oath. OK, so he's gone. Peter Strzok, who appears to have been trying to sabotage a presidential election. OK, he's gone. I mean, look, that's a good start. But the problem is bigger than that. If you read the Inspector General report, there's unnamed FBI agents who are engaged in this behavior. We haven't heard anything about them. And that barely even touches the surface, scratches the surface at this point.
I mentioned it before, but I did mean it in this regard, about the bias that was clearly evident in the Inspector General's report, and whether that had an influence or not, or triggered an investigation or not. What I've not seen is a bias toward the president, whether you like the guy or not. I haven't seen any agent texting back or forth. They might be out there praising then candidate Donald Trump. Not a lot of that. In fact, not any of that.
Well, there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, the FBI agents who might have been in favor of Donald Trump know how to do their job, and they don't use government cell phones to text those things.
No, right. That makes a lot of sense. All right.
Yeah, the other possibility is, Neil, that it's like a jackalope. It just doesn't exist. I mean, it's one of the two. Either they behave properly, unlike all the other anti-Trump FBI agents, or those people just don't exist.
What I also don't understand is this idea of context for some of the remarks that Strzok made. Now, of course, there was 11 hours of testimony, so I don't know what came of that testimony. But is it your understanding that there might have been context for this, that there might have been revelations we don't know about, that some of these, again, giving every benefit of the doubt here, might have been privy to information on the Russians, if there was such a thing, that was coloring their view.
Well, look, Neil, there might be, of course, but even if they knew about the Russian investigation, that doesn't excuse what they did. I mean, if they knew that there was this parallel Russia investigation taking place, that doesn't mean that you should rush out the closure memo on the Hillary investigation like Peter Strzok said he was going to do after watching the Republican convention and being nervous about Trump winning. So even if you know there's a Russia investigation, that doesn't excuse the bad behavior that was manifest.
Yeah, I'm looking at the backdrop for all of this. No matter what revelations might come to mind, some of these comments are so tawdry and almost childish. They go beyond worries about the safety of our nation state. So you're right about that. But where does this all go now? We've had this back and forth about bias at the FBI, how difficult it is to fire people there, revelations that come to mind only well after the fact. If not for these texts, for example, they still would have been getting information, or at least Strzok would have been getting information. Andy McCabe would have still been helping out with the investigation for Bob Mueller, and we would have never been wiser.
Right, and if Trump hadn't won, we wouldn't know. That's the other frightening prospect here. Look, where does this go? The American public now knows that the top levels of the FBI were biased against a Republican candidate for president. Then after he won, that bias seems to have continued. So at least we have more information. Are people going to go to jail? Well, Andrew McCabe repeatedly lied under oath. According to the Inspector General report, will Jesse Liu, who's the U.S. attorney in D.C., prosecute Andrew McCabe? Let's see if justice applies for everybody or if it just applies to people like Mike Flynn and Martha Stewart. We'll see whether that takes place.
You know, another thing I just wanted to step back and see is if nothing is done on this, on any of these accusations about bias, what have you, the Mueller report eventually comes out, and let's say it's damaging to the president, doesn't necessarily get too personal to him, but to those around him. Isn't the report risking being damaged goods, period, no matter who it fingers?
Yeah, it already, I think, is. I think if you look at the polling numbers, it's just astounding how little trust the American public now has in the FBI and the Justice Department because of their bad behavior. It's not for any other reason, Neil. It's because people behave badly. And so it's deserved. You know, you had Rod Rosenstein testifying yesterday. You seemed to have very thin skin. He talked about he scolded Jim Jordan for attacking him personally. Right. Well, he's making personal decisions. These are decisions of Rod Rosenstein, not some Autotron or robot. It's him who's not giving Congress the information they're asking for. So Rod Rosenstein deserves personal attacks for not behaving personally like he should.
It's a mess. Jay Kristen Adams, thank you very much. And try to stay cool this weekend. It's going to be hot where you are. It's going to be hot everywhere here.